It is very abrupt that it just drops us in, but I know it's
I'm still jamming.
Yep. Well, good morning, Sharon.
Good morning, and welcome to the Project Failure Files. This series is for anyone who manages projects for a living. If you've been a project, program manager, operations manager, group manager, or maybe even owned your own business where you're wearing all the hats, this weekly series is for you. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk. And welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and I will deviate slightly from the path and explore project management topics from the perspective of what not to do as you manage projects. In each episode of the Project Failure Files, we'll talk about some of the common pitfalls, sharing personal stories and experiences, which unfortunately we both have had lots of experiences about every single topic that we're covering here because we've been around for a long time. And then we explore strategies and best practices to help you to be successful.
So in this episode, we're talking about operational support versus defined projects, and maybe the problems that arise when the two are conflated. Should be an interesting topic.
I'm definitely interested in digging into the details in this one. And we talked a bit about, we talk every time about culture and process and structure and things, but I think it was episode 15, which is almost like a part 2. We refer to this one. But as with every episode, please feel free to comment throughout the episode, share your experiences and any great examples or feedback that we might have missed. If we don't follow it, catch it live with your comment, we will definitely follow up, but we love to get your feedback.
All right, let's get started. And maybe we should start with the definition.
Yeah. The way that I define this, Sharon, is that, you think about running the business is that operational activities. It's the things, if you never add a new piece of software, a new initiative, a new, anything, you're running the business. This is what we're in business doing. And we have the tools and the systems, the process, the people to do those things. So anything in support of the running of the business is the operational side of that. Yes, technically there's change management. There's a lot of other things around that. But then that's where I separate that in my mind, the project management side of that are net new requests, a new project, a new process, a new technology, anything that's going to change the operations model. At the end of that project, you have a new set of standard operating procedures, which you then move over into operations, hand off, train those people, and then they run it and they run the business.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Anything operational in my mind, I think of as operational as almost synonymous with day-to-day, right? So like think about ongoing support, ongoing maintenance, things that just happen like on a regular basis are typically operational, whereas projects, like you said, is something new, something different, something essentially where you're stepping back from your day-to-day life. So when I was in Six Sigma training, they talked about it as like the tornado or the vortex, right, of day-to-day operations. Like you just kind of get in there and everything just kind of zones around. And every once in a while you have to step out of that tornado or step out of that vortex and stop and say, we want to add something, change something, do something different. And that's where projects come into play because they're a little bit separate. And then the idea is that when they're done, they're going to kind of get sucked back into that operational tornado that happens day to day.
I remember with my first tech job, little company outside of Sacramento, and was brought in to help run a kind of one of the side businesses of the company, and it was like myself and then help from somebody on the marketing side. I eventually took over all of that, and it was really like the founder of the company and myself doing the bulk of that, and then working with the sales team. But I remember where he said, "Hey, I want to start a project to go and relook at expanding this and doing something new." And so he described it as kind of like I don't even call it a full feasibility. We weren't big enough for that. But that's essentially what it was. He said, He had an idea for something. He wanted to kind of flesh it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so in addition to those activities, that referred to it as this other side project. It gave it a name. And so we would have, create a couple deliverables. This is like 33 years ago. So it was a while back. So the gray hairs, folks.
So are you like typing this on a typewriter, or?
It was a computer. It was an actual computer, but I was so excited that when I got my first VGA screen. So this is how long ago this was. I think that job, I was wondering, were 486s even a thing yet? I think they were still the latest, greatest were the 486 PCs were the latest ones out there. But anyway, but it was seen as separate from let's get the work done. I don't want this to impact the regular daily activities, but he wanted me to help outline this so that we could further brainstorm on it with each of the different division heads and make some decisions. Here's what we're going to do. And it ended up being a whole new product for this side and expanding this side business, which enabled eventually that side business to be sold to another company. But again, it was outside of that. So I've always considered myself a project-based person versus operations. I mean, operations where it's, you're running the system. And so you're more reactive to what's happening. Changes come in and you're dealing with those things. So think of like a support, organization, and you've got your support engineers that are answering questions. Maybe you have frontline support people that are on the phones taking things in, then engineering and product people behind that are trying to solve customer problems, make updates to the technology itself. But it's this reactive but continuous structured system.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then the project side is basically when you're doing something that is kind of niched out. I always love to use analogies for everything. I think it helps me to understand things, and hopefully it helps other people to understand things too. But I think about this a lot in daily life. And one of the things I think about is, for example, grocery shopping, right? I love to use grocery shopping and process management stuff because it's something we all do all the time and we don't even think about it. But you think about the idea of operational is I have to get groceries several times a week, several times a month, right? We're getting different.
To eat. It's a
you
thing.
Have to eat, yeah, right? So right. You have to get groceries all the time. Grocery shopping in and of itself is operational, right? I got to get food when I need to eat. Sometimes I get more, sometimes I get less, sometimes I get different things. Reorganizing your pantry is a project.
Well, I was going to say, Sharon, going to Home Depot or Lowe's, that's project related.
There you go.
Not operations.
Exactly.
I don't need to install new shelves in the pantry, but it's a project. We've been talking about it. We want to get more organized.
Yes.
And so once you build the new shelves, they're there. They then become part of operations.
Exactly. And then, exactly to that point. So when you have to do something different, then that's project based, and it probably has a start and a finish, and it has milestones and things like that. But then once you're done, you're going to continue to buy groceries, put them away, eat them, things like that. So the grocery part of it is the operational part, but anything outside of that is project based. And so I like to look at things like this because a lot of times people, like you said, a lot of fancy words, and those are great, but it doesn't make sense to me, what the difference is. So I try to kind of think of what are things in our real day life that, kind of match up. So there you go.
Well, one of the other things I know that is difficult for people to kind of separate the two is because if you're in a very large organization, you may have complete separation of those roles and responsibilities. You might have project managers that do nothing but net new projects that come in. That's their world, that's their focus. Well, and then people that have a PM type role or a management role that are over in the operations side with the ongoing. The reality is that, and I've been in a super large organizations where it was very much matrixed, and there was a mix of operations, tasks, ongoing, projects, tasks, and new projects coming in. And I just think that's the reality of, the real world scenario is that if you're a PM or have a similar function, you're likely going to have a mix of those things, but there is a benefit to understanding the differences between those and tracking them differently.
Yep. No, I agree with that. I think there's always a different mix of people. And one also depends on how big or small you are, how your resource allocation is, what your maturity level, your organization is, different things like that as to how well defined those roles are.
Yeah. And the cultures of those teams can also be very different. There's some people that gravitate towards that. And as we talked about in episode 15, that are some people are just built for ticket taking. They love that structure, the repeatability, like they know what they're doing every day. They're going through, there's depending on their role and the type of the company. We both work primarily with tech. But you have a methodology, a structure for, hey, how we're going to go through something, solve these technical problems, spin it back out. Versus I was always on the other side of I found myself in several organizations in the kind of shared services role. And it was I never looked at it. Some people looked at it as, special projects is the name to avoid. When I say shared services, it's more of a matrixed doing other projects across multiple organizations that are like shared between this. Like even in a large enterprise, like at HP, for example, the PMs were working across a number of different divisions on projects. You might have a PM that is a project manager that is dedicated to one group, but then needs to go get help on things and bring other people in that are working across different divisions, which is mostly where I've been. So I might be working on a back end hardware project, updating that, as well as front end applications that I'm supporting that are projects, as well as working with the BA team to document and make changes to our project management methodology, the overall project approach, which is more in the change management, but on the operations side of things. And I actually, going way back when I was a BA, was actually working with the engineers and documenting code and process as part of that. It was very much part of ongoing operations to make sure that the format was followed, the structure was there, and we were literally printing pages, and I would have to go over to Beacon Storage, drive across town to put it in cold storage and swap out pages, because that was just part of what was required by the state of California for our team to have physical stored copies of things. This is 30 plus years ago.
I see. I disagree. I did a lot of special project stuff too, and I think special projects is the place to be, man. Like that's the cool stuff. That's the stuff where like you get the innovative stuff. And I agree. I've always been more in the project space and less in the operational space. I typically am handing off or training what's going to end up being the people who are going to support or maintain, what the project delivered. But I think it's important to understand it.
The only thing, Sharon, I'd say is that, we've both been around long enough, like that I've worked through, and the younger generation may not understand this, but I've been through 3 recessions. In the last 33 years, there have been 3 full-fledged recessions.
Wow, Christian.
And
really
all
talking
3,
about your age there.
and all 3, I've been laid off 3 times in 3 recessions around that. And part of the issue, and twice they tried to hire me right back because they realized, so they cut too deeply into, the special projects, like that side of thing, where that the only, and this, I know this is off topic a bit, but this is the, like, how you market yourself when you're in the background. I learned this lesson.
Bonus tip.
If you're too much in the background of something and people, like, you're so busy focusing on getting your stuff done. I've always been on these teams that we get all of our stuff done. Then people tend to forget that we're there. And then when we're gone, they're like, oh crap, they were doing all this stuff. And then that's where they try to
Don't be
higher
taken
value.
for granted. Be visible, guys. Be
Yeah,
visible.
that's another topic that we should cover, of being visible. Actually, I should write that down.
Yeah. Add that to the
Yeah,
backlog.
like it's written down now.
Yeah, baby.
And that's how we do it, people. We add new topics. But yeah, that is that's kind of like the difference between those two, is that you've got one that's very much out in the forefront, and then operations wise, but when cuts are made, generally they go and say, well, we can't cut the operations, we've got the business has to run.
We need groceries. We have to eat.
We'll cut the people that are out at front doing that new stuff that we really need this.
Because we don't always need a new pantry, Christian.
That's right. Well, yeah, aesthetically we do, but yes. Yeah. But some of the the impacts of, so having it's important to have like that separation of the roles, even if you're doing the same things, to talk about, like, it would be great to go to your manager and say, look, I'm spending right now about 60% of my time in operational activities versus the 40% in projects, and maybe 30% project and 10% overhead, depends on how you're reporting in your activity. And then talk about that. Say, look, I think we need to be investing more in these future forward-looking new projects. I'd like to kind of switch that out, so you can have that conversation if you have that separation. But it also means that, I think this is a key thing, is if you're so focused on operations and don't have that separation, then that's generally an organization that is not looking at as much at innovation and how do we improve.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think even, back to your real life, like if you're spending your whole time grinding, right? Keeping regular things happening, keeping the lights on, keeping life support, getting groceries, like whatever it is, how much energy do you have at the end of the day to do something new, to do something different? You're exhausted, you're worn out, you're mentally, spent. And I think this happens in organizations as well. I don't think if you don't prioritize there being somebody or somebodies to at least focus a certain amount of time towards those new, different change opportunities, then you're going to stay at the same level that you're at. And from a maturity perspective, you're always going to be there. And how are you going to move up? How are you going to grow? How are you going to move forward if you're not investing? And I mean investment on purpose, the time, the energy, the resources to look at those new opportunities or changes that might benefit you.
I think that there's, we talk about the benefits of the pandemic. It did cause a lot of organizations to get more introspective and look at, burnout of your people. It's a real thing. And having the separation, the clearly defined, operations versus project, can then help people to define for themselves, like, where do I really fit? What's my passion? What are my skills? And talk about, are we burning people out on operations where they are just waiting for the opportunity to sink their teeth into something new and use more of the strategic skills? What other people, like, I'm very much not a fan of the we must purge 10% of our employees every year, kind of that Jack Welch model that was never meant to be long-term people. It's a huge mistake that large companies have made. It was meant to be during a time of change, like with an acquisition, for example, to go through and look at things that way. But to give people that opportunity to do some self-reflection and say, where am I the best fit for this? And some people will gravitate towards operations and others towards the project management. There'll often be a balance between there. But when you are collaborative and open and talking about these things, it's going to help you better understand, hey, when a new project is dropped, like, who can I go to versus offload? Like, I've had this scenario where I took a PM where I took operational activities off of their plate so I could add something new, and I knew who to give those pieces to because of their roles. So, both could be seen as stepping up and doing more in their roles, but one on the operations, one on the new project. You
Yeah.
can't see that and do that if you're not talking about it, if you don't have that visibility and you don't have that separation.
And if you've never experienced this or you're not sure, oh, I think that sounds great, guys, but like I don't know about the real world value of this, I challenge you to internally do some sort of like a project hackathon. It's very well known in software development companies. They do hackathons on a regular basis. But not all companies do that. And I think to take that model of taking 1 day, 2 days, letting your basically, keep the lights on as minimally as possible, but like basically put your business on life support for 1 to 2 days, let your employees go and create something new or work on a problem
Mhm.
that's been sitting on the shelf for a long time. And I think what you will find is just investing 1 or 2 days, 1 or 2 times a year and doing that hackathon approach will let you see the value in why it's so important to separate project and operational from each other.
If for people that have never been through the kind of training, and I know it's done with management and with leadership development courses, there have been though like systems thinking, planning consultants that I've worked at organizations where they brought in where we're looking at a problem or sometimes it's like planning for the next year. So now looking at 2025, 2026. And let's look at these things through a different lens, like so looking at the problems in a different way,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes bringing in an outside consultant that they have different whiteboarding I would call them gimmicks is the wrong word, but they've got different
Tools and
skills, different
techniques.
tools and techniques, right, to let you look at the problem in different ways, and you might find you'll get ideas or innovation may come out because of those different approaches. It's like I
Mhm.
just keep thinking in marketing terms, Sharon, of like you've got all the various channels of marketing, and if something's not working, you change the marketing mix and try something new. And sometimes that doesn't work out, but what you learn from that experience, you push it back over here. And another great example of that is like all the technology that came out of like NASA in the 60s and 70s and really going forward, so much and many other commercial modern products and ideas that came out of the fact that we were going after this goal that like, do we need to send somebody to the moon? Why do we care? Did it actually happen, Sharon? Was it staged? No, not getting into that. But creating all that technology um, helped open up ideas and
Mhm.
innovations in a different direction. And so that is sometimes can really help. That's why a lot of great project ideas come out of operations.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, back to our analogy is who wants to eat spaghetti every single night for dinner, right? If you've never tried anything new, you never attempt anything new, you never buy new cookbooks, you never go out to dinner anywhere because operationally you're literally just doing the same thing every day because it meets the need. Who wants to eat the same thing all the time? Who wants to do the same thing all the time? I think there's value in innovation, there's value in change, there's value in having different perspectives and looking at things differently, using different tools and techniques to solve the same problems. We don't want to end up, so much the same that we never move forward.
Well, and you say all that, but then I think of like my wife, no matter what restaurants we go to, there's like I know exactly the three meals, depending on like covers any type of restaurant that we go to, the three meals that she selects every time. But I'm like, I don't complain about that. It's I know that. I know her kind of her comfort level with food. Like she's not a daredevil with food. Thankfully all four kids are like they'll like try anything.
I'll try
And
anything that won't kill me.
right, at least once they'll try that and they'll explore things. But my wife's still like, nope. But very comfortable. Like my wife likes the operational side. She likes to have the checklist. There was this in fact in the 70s, I think it started in the 70s, was this whole cleaning movement. And there was a woman who was like an organizational expert called that like I think it was the housefly lady. And I
Hmm.
think she's still out there if you go look it up and search it on the interwebs. But anyway, there used to be like conferences and stuff around it. But anyway, the concept, my wife read a book learning about this and this idea of the control binder, which seems really like overkill for keeping up the house. But
It does not.
when she's organized, so her mind is that way, that's having a binder. And I guess the premise of the control binder is that, taking care of the house, taking care of the kids. She stopped working and full-time at home homemaker. And eventually we had 4 kids. I realized that I had the better end of the deal chaos wise with kids doing stuff. But the control binder, so every day she would go through the checklist of things to do. It would concentrate on like one room out of the house to go and do. Like, you're not going to be able to do everything. We've talked about boiling the ocean, that problems with project management. And so the idea of this control binder was to keep it focused on what can be done, and it's incremental to go through to get stuff done on a regular basis. So she just gravitated towards that thing, and she doesn't need to have the physical binder sitting on the counter anymore. It's ingrained, but that's the way that she thinks. Oh, it's Tuesday. Tuesday is this day. This is what I do on Tuesdays around the house, kind of things. That was great. That got her through that. Now they're all gone, and I work in the basement, and she's gone off working up north every day. But things.
But you're still operational.
Now we just don't have the chaos. So we don't have to have a page going through the things to clean the kitchen, because the 2 of us just know to put the dirty dishes in the dishwasher, and then there's nothing in the sink. Yeah. Anyway, but so having that. Having that structure, that separation. The problems without it, you think about without having that separation is sometimes, you have that inconsistent focus. What do we want people to working on? What are they actually going and doing? How do they know to prioritize those things? How do they know what the priorities are or can change? And so that could cause delays to timelines, to budgets. And when you talk about it too, especially in operations and support organizations, service level agreements are a huge thing. Internally at large companies, like we had response windows where we had to, new things come in, make sure we're triaging and getting some information, even if that information is, we don't know yet, we're looking at it still. But that we were contractually obligated to every 2 hours to provide an update. Even if non-status. So that stuff can happen more frequently or be messier if there's not that separation.
Yeah, I think when it's all kind of put together, I think one of the biggest risks that you face is that because everybody's kind of so busy doing things, what ends up happening is it becomes that kind of squeaky wheel situation where instead of, to your point with the binder, right? Instead of saying, okay, we've got operational stuff and we know that we need to regularly kind of fold in these specific different changes or new things that are maybe not part of the day-to-day thing. Instead, if you're just like, we don't know who's doing what or when, and everybody's just kind of doing everything, then what ends up happening is whatever the loudest, squeakiest thing is tends to kind of top the priority list, and everything else just kind of falls to the side because we haven't put any boundaries around anything. Nobody's responsible for keeping the lights on versus taking care of the one-offs, right? And so I think everything just kind of gets messy and we end up prioritizing things the wrong way for the wrong reasons.
Well, having those boundaries, setting expectations for the organization, and this goes back to having, like we talked about in previous episodes, but having that framework, that methodology, as we say every time, like, don't care what methodology you use, but use a methodology, have something. And there's probably already culturally a de facto methodology inside, and use that, add to it, expand it, document it so people know. And when they can see it, and when they see the patterns of that framework in place being used, then they trust that, they trust the process. But I part of that, I believe, is to define those separate roles and activities. Again, you might have
100%.
percentages, but then you go back and talk about it. It's like, well, you didn't do anything like any new big things. Yeah, because I was taking on 80% of my role was operations. I was more focused on making sure everything was running solid. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's why big companies, Microsoft did this, where they actually went and created dual pathways for roles. So it wouldn't be looked down upon that you weren't doing some new projects when your specialty was, your strength was in the operation side, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think it's great to have that delineation. I think it helps people to know what they're focused on. And like you said, even if, okay, say we don't have enough bandwidth or enough need for it to be two direct people, maybe it's one person that's kind of splitting their time. But I think the clearer it is, and this comes back to communication, this comes back to, being purposeful about what you're doing. This comes back to maturity levels and defining processes and SOPs and things like that. But I think just being mindful and being communicative about what you're doing and when. And I'm even going to go so far as, especially if you're in a small place, time boxing, time boundaries, marking it on your calendar as to what you're doing and when and what that focus is, I think really helps to understand, am I working on a project focus right now? Am I working on operational focus right now? And being able to clearly state and understand what that time is going to, I think makes a big difference.
And it's critical to be able to have that organized so that you can properly prioritize, because a new project may come in and may have some sense of urgency, but then when you go and you look at, okay, here's our resources, here's the people that we have, what they're focused on.
Yeah.
What are you going to have them stop doing? And you might weight more heavily the ongoing operations, the running of the business around that. But again, that should be part of your triaging of new projects. Is it leading towards something that will increase our efficiency in operations by 20%? Okay, we're going to go and pursue that. It's a higher priority than these nice to have, like the new shelves in the pantry. Nice to have, don't need it to survive here as a family eating food.
The attic windows can skip a monthly washing if it's really that big of a deal.
Right. So again, having dedicated teams is not something that's necessary. And I don't know if you even want to have that kind of division, but again, depending on the size of the organization, it might make sense. And part of that is because they're going to be measured differently. The metrics around that should not be the same. And here's another shocker for people out there is like, don't treat every organization, every team in your company or even individuals around, like you could have the high level metrics, but you can't manage by spreadsheet. You can't treat everybody the same with one set of metrics. Like within a team, within a role, I mean, the larger you get, the easier it is to have that separation. It's a bit more cloudy with small teams, small businesses.
I think you're like 100% dead on there. Here's the issue I find. Businesses so often treat project-based roles as luxury goods as opposed to operational roles, because operational roles tend to be, we have to have that. But project-based roles, maybe we could live without if times are hard. And I don't think that's an answer at all. I absolutely think you need both to be successful.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, I think part of it too, the key to this, and we talk about this each time too, is making sure that the leadership team, that the executive team, the founders, whatever they are in your organization, that they can see that framework, that they have a voice in that, but to help them understand this is the role of the manager, the people manager, to make sure you defend the system, defend your people, say, here's what we're doing. This is why we're doing this. And here's how we can provide you with greater insight into the impacts of these changes or the impacts of all these new customers, or we just did an acquisition. We're more quickly able to consume this other team and new products and services and do all these things because we can separate these activities. Here's what needs to change in the business, the way that we're running the business. Here's what we need to do as far as new projects. There's a lot of things to think about to do this right. Thinking about, the transition of projects. So we have a new initiative we're going to go and take a look at, like I've done so many times, because I started my first PM role was as an applications PM. My job was the front end tools to these massive databases that I'd been working with. And then working with these end user groups that were like the super users of these products. And we're talking about like SaaS, business objects, tools like that. And part of it was part of the project plan was, okay, we've gone through, we've done the feasibility study, we selected the tool, here's the technical requirements, we're going to deploy it, I've got doing the training, and all of that is then the handoff of it's now live, it's in there, and here's the handoff. So as part of the project, for example, in that example, 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, it was working with the data centers where I'd actually go and, similarly with EDS before that, when I talked about swapping out pages and binders, literally switching out pages and binders
I remember
for
that.
each of the servers up on the floor and in the data warehouse in the warehouse. So going out to the servers, and you had the standard operating procedures around each of those servers. So they're being monitored in the NOC as they see something goes wrong. They send a guy out there, and this guy, it was all like temperature controlled with the automatic lights that would come on, and he would go out on roller skates, and you'd see the lights turning on as he's flowing around the data center floor, and he'd be swapping stuff out, making adjustments on different things. But having that handoff, having that documented process, making sure they're training on that, and then follow-ups to that, communication of those changes, it's a key part of that handoff between project and operations.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important. And I think the only thing I would add to that is, at a high maturity level, I think when you're doing projects in general, the best way you can be successful is to communicate and collaborate throughout the project as much as possible. And this is one of the things we do with our consulting company is our expectation when we complete a project, when we hand a project over for them to then continue using the product or whatever, is that we have done a good enough job of helping, working with them, understanding it, and training and transitioning throughout the project itself, that by the time we hand it over, the support and maintenance side of that is very, very limited and very little. And, they can move on, and they don't need us to be there holding their hand for them
Right.
to use whatever it is we've handed over. So I think, the tip that I would give you there is to be real successful in transitioning projects out of project phase and into operational phase is the more you can involve yourself with the users, whoever's going to be using it throughout the process of the project itself, the easier that transition and that handover is going to be ultimately. And going forward, that operational ongoing, can I help you? Can I support you? Can I train you? Can I change things? Gets easier and easier and easier because you've already kind of built the basis for that relationship and that communication, so that then that kind of going in and out of project and operations gets a lot easier.
I think that's an important point to make too, whether internal or an external consultant, like we do. I mean, I think gone are the days. I know there's still a number of them out there, but are consulting companies where their job is just to plug themselves in and find endless projects. Like we do have MSPs, managed service providers, where they're an extension of your organization. They're
operational in nature.
Right, correct. And they might be running like, in small to medium-sized businesses, they might be your desktop support, your building out new laptops for new employees, making sure that you're getting the most out of the technology you use on a day-to-day basis. That's what MSPs do. Like a small business of 4 or 5 people, you don't need to go hire a dedicated IT person. You can hire that out. So that's a little bit different than what I'm talking about. But for projects as a consultant, like it's not my goal to be in there ongoing on retainer forever. Or at least, I mean, I do like retainers and I do like longer contracts, but like doing different things. But I take pride in the fact that I've worked in jobs even internally where I had that approach, where I literally worked myself out of a job and moved on because I strengthened the process and the ability to understood it was cross training constantly. So the knowledge level of those end users rose, they were able to do that and take on and do more.
Mhm.
So it allowed me and my role, again, internally or externally, to go and work on other net new. What's the next thing that's going to increase is another 20% in efficiency and productivity, and focus on those things. That's how the business grows.
Yeah, no, and so my background is in psychology, and we brought from Brenner's microsystems, macrosystems, right?
Mhm.
And I think, you also have to think of it this way: is I talked a little bit about, operations is necessary, but then, project is luxury goods. Sometimes I think there's a need, like you said, sometimes there's day to day, but there's improvements to that day to day that happen all of the time. And I think when we discount that and we don't think about that, it's not working yourself out of a job. It is increasing the maturity level of your operational unit over time consistently. I think as long as you have somebody at that macro system level or architecture level to be able to continue to improve that operation. And this is where we get into programs like operational excellence and things like that, where you're basically making sure that your operations are as good and as efficient as they can be, which is a gigantic investment that you're going to get a lot of value out of.
That's hey, I'm always happy to quote W. Edwards Deming and say, optimize the system. You could be at like 99% efficiency today, but people change, technology changes. There's a lot of things that your business rules are constantly evolving and changing, where you're continually, it's the whole process of continual Kaizen, folks.
They
It's
call it process improvement for a reason.
Right. It's a whole thing. But to total quality management, kind of all those different things, which are you're continually inwardly looking at our process and how can we improve on these things, and
we need a sticker. It's not process stay the same.
It's not process stay the same. Process hyphen stay the same. Yeah, that would actually be a good sticker. Yeah. I mean, with all this stuff too, is that like, ongoing is, with your operational planning, likewise, it's just the other way around. Your operational planning should include a percentage of time and budget for change, for growth. You don't know what it is yet. Those are called projects. Maybe
that's in Agile, it's iteration 0. Right. I know there's a lot of different places and different methodologies have different ways of dealing with this, but it's that idea of always taking a break to stop and look at things and make sure that what you're doing is the right thing.
There's a lot. Yeah, I think it's important to have a distinction between these, kind of backing up, having that distinction between operational support and defined projects, which will help with efficiencies and reducing confusion, and you'll have more successful project outcomes. And from a culture standpoint, from a people standpoint, people will be happier in those roles because it'll be more personalized, more finely tuned to their skills and their path forward with what they want to do in managing their careers. So it's yeah.
I think identifying that the two things both have value. I think knowing which one you're doing, and I think investing in having both of those things and being clear and distinct about it. Like you said, I think it helps people understand what they're doing and when, and it makes everything kind of run a little bit smoother and a little bit better.
Yep. Well, I know to wrap up, that's all for this week. Of course, I've had it on there. I've left it on there, but you can follow Sharon and I out on X. And of course, you can find our names. If you just search our names, you'll find lots of stuff.
It's easy to find us.
Yeah. And then, of course, back episodes are all out on youtube.com/@BuckleyPlanet, as well as we have our Facebook group out there around Project Failure Files. So please subscribe, follow us, join us. Reach out with any questions, follow about this topic or any others. We are happy to respond. And we will be back next Monday at the same time, 9 a.m. Pacific, every Monday, because Sharon and I need to go in and reprioritize our projects because apparently we have a lot of time on our hands.
Forever and ever and ever.
Forever and ever. But yeah, so thanks everybody for watching. And Sharon, hey, it was great talking to you as well.
You too. Thanks for watching. See you next time.